That one is called Oid Yeshama, as we're working our way through Joey Newcomb's new album, Big Avoidus. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Move that over there. In case you haven't heard a shofar blast today, we blast it every day in Elul. And who is with us on a Tuesday night, getting back into the thick of it? Sharon in New Jersey, Shandor in the Bronx, Yehudit in South Carolina, Renee in Indiana, Paula in Chicago, James in Indianapolis, John in Maine, Sam in Virginia, Nancy in North Carolina, Bella in Florida, Laura in Oklahoma, Paula loves the music, Belle is on a road trip, Lisa in Massachusetts, Dave in South Bend, Steven in Connecticut, Joseph in Massachusetts, Clarice in Mexico City, Gwen in Michigan. Welcome, everybody. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Georgia, Gwen in Michigan. All right. Really interesting, fun page today. Today's daf is Samech Beis, page 62, here in Tractate Kesubos, the 15th volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 5, continuing our discussion of Mishnah number 5. Recall that in this Mishnah, we learned two things: that a husband may not take a vow to deny conjugal relations, marital relations to his wife. And if he was to take such a vow and he could not, find some extenuating circumstance in order to have that vow dissolved for him by a rabbi, by a sage, if he couldn't get the vow dissolved, then he would have to divorce his wife immediately because this is an obligation of a husband to his wife. Could he take a temporary obligation, a time-limited vow? I mean, could he make a vow just for a short time not to have marital relations with his wife? Well, how long? And this runs into the law, which is the second part of our Mishnah. How often is a husband obligated to provide marital relations to his wife if that is what she wants? And what we learn is that different men have different obligations depending on the kind of exertion that is required of him in his life, in his career, and in his life otherwise. And we're going to be learning about that today. So we picked this up at the very bottom of page 61b, and the Mishnah said that students may leave their homes and travel for up to 30 days in order to learn Torah without their wives' permission. And the Gemara asks, if they went with permission, for how long can they go? And the Gemara expresses wonderment at this question. Well, if they went with permission, with the permission of their wives, they can go for as long as they want. If the husband and wife agree on this, why is there any reason for the court to intervene? Now we're on 62a. And the Gemara explains its query. Although a man can legally make any agreement with his wife to limit her conjugal rights, like if she participates in this agreement, well, how much is an acceptable manner for this matter? So even though they are permitted to agree on a number, the fact is the couple should make love, with some kind of frequency, a certain kind of frequency, and even if she agrees to it, less than that would be inappropriate. So Rav said, well, the husband may spend a month here in the study hall, and then he must spend a month at home. And the allusion to this is as it is stated with regard to the reserve units serving in King David's army. We learn in 1 Chronicles 27:1, in any matter of the courses, which came in and went out month by month throughout all the months of the year. And so we learned that the reserve units, those who were not absolutely needed for the war effort, would spend a month in the army and a month at home so that they could be with their wives at least every other month. And Rabbi Yochanan said, This Torah scholar may spend 1 month here in the study hall and then 2 months in his home, as it is stated with regard to workers who worked in the construction of the temple. When Solomon built the first temple, 1 Kings 5:28, a month they were in Lebanon quarrying the stones for the temple, and 2 months at home. So the Gemara asks, and what is the reason that Rav did not also say a proof from that source that Rabbi Yochanan brought, a month working and 2 months at home? Is that what he said? Yeah, a month working and 2 months at home. Why didn't Rav say like that, the way Rabbi Yochanan said? And the Gemara answers, well, the construction of the temple is different, since it is possible for this work to be performed by others, as there were many people involved in it. But with regard to Torah study, which cannot be performed by others, meaning anybody can study Torah, but you can't delegate someone to study it for you, right? If you wanted to be at home with your wife, you could find a worker to fill in for you in the quarry, but you can't find somebody else to fill in for you in the study hall. You have your own obligation to learn Torah. And the Gemara further questions, and what is the reason that Rabbi Yochanan did not say a proof from the source that Rav quoted, a month in the army, a month at home? And the Gemara answers, well, there, with regard to the reserve units of King David's army, it is different, since he gains profit from working for the king. And since there is profit involved in serving in those reserved units, his wife might be willing to forego his being at home with her every other month. However, in general, a woman wants her husband to spend most of his time at home. So with regard to Torah study, where there is no monetary profit for studying, she will not waive her right for such a long time. Now, apropos a dispute between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan with regard to the construction of the temple, the Gemara cites another dispute between them, between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav said, groaning breaks half of a person's body. As it is stated, groan, therefore, you son of man, with the breaking of your loins, groan so bitterly. That's Ezekiel 21:11, which indicates that groaning breaks half of one's body down to his loins. It like breaks the upper half of your body, or at least half your body. And Rabbi Yochanan said, no, actually groaning breaks even a person's entire body, as it is stated, and it shall be when they say to you, why are you groaning? That you shall say, due to the tiding, the news. For it comes, and every heart shall melt, and all hands shall be slack, and every spirit shall be faint, and all knees shall drip with water. This is a very important teaching. We're all going to encounter challenges, hardship, misfortune, really tough days. So groaning, we're not talking about the, when somebody, when you get hit in the face and that sound just escapes from your mouth, that's just a reflex. No one can help that. But when things are going badly and you think about your situation, you're like, ugh. Making that sound, essentially wallowing in your misfortune, it's not going to help your misfortune reverse itself. And it's going to be harmful to you, right? Bad things are going to happen, no doubt. But as quickly as we can, we've got to change our focus to what is positive, what is going right. As Joey Newcomb sings in this other song, Im yesh mikvah, yesh tikva. As long as there is a chance to better the situation, there is hope. Focus on the hope, focus on the positive. And this is not just a good spiritual teaching. What they're telling us here is it's a good medical teaching, right? Because wallowing in misfortune, groaning with how bad things might be for the time being, it's actually harmful to the body. And I think we all see that. I personally, from time to time, have eczema issues. Those kinds of breakouts in the skin, they get worse when you're stressed, when emotional things are going wrong. The body actually suffers. That's a very, easy to see connection. But I think we all know that one's emotional well-being has an effect on the body. And knowing that, we have to find ways to focus on the positive for the sake of the body. Okay, and so the Gemara And the Gemara asks, and why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan also say that it breaks half of one's body? Isn't it written with the breaking of your loins, implying that it does not break the entire body? Why does Rabbi Yochanan says it breaks your whole body, whereas Rav says that groaning breaks half of your body? And so the Gemara answers, well, this does not mean that the breakage only reaches the loins, but rather that when the sigh begins to affect a person, it begins from his loins. And the Gemara asks, and why doesn't Rav also say that it breaks the entire body? Isn't it written, and every heart shall melt, and all hands shall be slack, and every spirit shall be faint, which indicates that groaning causes the entire body to break? And the Gemara answers, the news with regard to the destruction of the temple that's mentioned in this verse of the book of Ezekiel, talking about when they heard that the temple had been destroyed, okay, this is different as it is extremely crushing and it causes great anguish. But in general, a sigh or a groan only breaks half the body. Let us not, exaggerate that every groan causes the whole body to break down. But, it's enough to say that breaks half the body, good enough reason to focus on the positive. An incident. It is related that a certain Jew and a Gentile were walking along the road together, and the Gentile could not keep up with the Jew, who was walking faster, and he therefore reminded him of the destruction of the temple in order to make the Jew feel sorrowful, so he would be forced to slow down. Well, the Jew sighed and groaned, but even so, the Gentile could not keep up with him in their walking on the road, as the Jew was still walking faster. So the Gentile said to him, Don't you say that groaning breaks half of a person's body? Why didn't it affect you? And the Jew answered, well, this applies only with regard to a new sorrowful affair. But this, from which we have suffered repeatedly, maybe for hundreds of years already when this story is being told, it does not affect us as much as people say one who is used to being bereaved does not panic when, further bad news comes in. Okay. New subject. Now, we're getting back to our Mishnah and the frequency with which certain kinds of men are obligated to have marital relations with their wives. The Mishnah said that men of leisure must engage in marital relations with their wives every day. And the Gemara asks, what is meant by the term men of leisure? And Rava said, well, these are students of Torah who go daily to review their lectures at a local study hall, and then they're home every night. So they're available to have marital relations every day if that's what their wives want. So Abaye said to him, wives of Torah scholars are those about whom it is written, it is vain for you to rise early and sit up late, you that eat the bread of toil, so he gives to his beloved in sleep. Psalm 127, verse 2. And Rabbi Yitzhak explained, these are the wives of Torah scholars who deprive their eyes of sleep in this world and reach the life of the world to come. And this indicates that Torah scholars exert themselves greatly in their studies, and they're not home in the evenings. They're learning 20 hours a day. And you say that the students reviewing their lectures are men of leisure whose wives have conjugal rights for every night? You cannot mean Torah scholars. Rather, Abaye explains, men of leisure, this can be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rav. As Rav said, this is referring to a man such as Rabbi Shmuel bar Shelat, who ate his own food, drank his own drinks, slept in the shade of his own home, and the king's tax collector did not pass by his door, as they did not know that he was a man of means. A man like this, who has a steady income and no worries, this is a man of leisure. It doesn't mean that he's rich. He might be working, but he's a guy who makes enough. He's comfortable. He's not stressed. He's got some money in the bank. He's got a comfortable home. He's got a happy marriage. He doesn't have major problems. During that period of his life, he is a man of leisure. And with him, his wife could have conjugal rights every night when it's possible, when she wants. So when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, for example, the pampered men in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, they are called men of leisure. Due to the time they have available and the richness of their diet, they have the ability to satisfy their wives every night. So right away we see that, who is this so-called man of leisure? Well, different sages have different definitions. Maybe it really does mean a rich man. Maybe it just means one who is content with what he has. He's not stressed out. But whoever suggested that it's a Torah scholar, if it's a true Torah scholar, he's working so hard that, he's immersed in everything. Maybe an older, wiser Torah scholar, despite putting in so many hours, he's going to make time for his wife. He's not going to be stressed out, and maybe he could be available every day, but that's not going to be the usual thing. And to illustrate this point, the Gemara relates two incidents demonstrating the health and strength of the inhabitants of Eretz Yisrael, where they're saying maybe these are the pampered and rich of the land of Israel. Rabbi Abahu was once standing in the bathhouse, and two slaves were supporting his walking. The bathhouse collapsed under him, and it was destroyed. He found a pillar, he stood on it and got out, and he pulled up his attendants, the ones who were helping him stand. You get the image of kind of an old man who has attendants who are helping him walk around. But when there was like an earthquake or this floor collapse, he actually was able to catch the guys who were supposedly helping him, and he saved their lives. Because a bathhouse has a big fire underneath the ground floor that's heating up the water in the bathhouse. So when that catches fire, it's like these guys are going to fall into the fire, but he saves them by being strong enough to hold up two guys. And he pulled them both up. And similarly, Rabbi Yochanan, so these are both sages in Israel, right, in the land of Israel. Rabbi Yochanan was once going upstairs, and Rav Ami and Rav Asi were supporting him, and the stair collapsed under him, but he went up and pulled them both up with him. And the sages said to him, "Since it is clear that you are so strong, why do you need people to support you?" And he said to them, "Well, if so, if I were to expend all my strength now, what will I leave for myself in old age?" Next subject. The Mishna said the set interval for laborers to fulfill their conjugal obligations to their wives is twice a week. Okay, so the men of leisure, that was every day. Laborers is going to be twice a week. In a moment, we're going to read about donkey drivers who are once a week, camel drivers, I think, are once a month, and eventually sailors is every 6 months. Now, what's interesting, it's not mentioned here in Tractate Kesubos, but it is mentioned elsewhere in the rabbinic literature. What is the Torah source for this idea that the men of these different types of professions have a different, frequency of conjugal relations obligation? Where can we find a source for that, or at least an allusion to that, in the Torah? And we have it at Genesis 32:15, as Rashi explains. So Genesis 32:15, it takes place in the story of, Jacob, after he sort of played that trick on his father Isaac and pretended to be his brother Esau, put the sheepskin on his arm so that he would be hairy, and he got the blessing of the firstborn from Isaac. And then Esau, when he returned from hunting for goodies for his father, was devastated to find out that his brother had taken the blessing of the firstborn. And Esau was so angry that he vowed to kill Jacob. And so Jacob runs away, right? His mother Rivka, who put him up to that whole trick, tells him, "Go to my family, my brother Lavan, stay there, get yourself a wife, let your brother's anger cool down, and then eventually you can come back." And so Jacob ends up spending 20 years away. And so when he returns, he's got, he doesn't have 12 kids yet, right? So he's got 11 kids, right? So the 10 boys, he's got 11 boys and Dinah, so he's got 12 kids, but Benjamin hasn't been born yet. And he's got 4 wives, right? He's got Rachel, and Leah, and their 2 maidservants who also become his wives. So he's returning, and he's got tremendous amount of wealth that he acquired while he was in that other place. He was taking care of the flocks and the herds for his uncle Lavan, but eventually God took care of him and able to have his own flocks. And so he comes back with a lot of livestock, a lot of wealth, a huge family. And he's terrified that his brother Esau, even though it's 20 years later, is still angry with him, still looking to kill him. And so just before the brothers reunite, Jacob sends a whole bunch of gifts to Esau, kind of ahead of himself, hoping to placate Esau's anger. right? And so in Genesis 32:14, right, it says Jacob spent the night there, and then he took from that which had come into his hand a tribute for Esau, his brother. And what did he send to Esau? She-goats, 200, and he-goats, 20. So there were 200 female goats and 20 male goats. Female sheep, 200, and male sheep, 20. Nursing camels and their young, 30. 40 cows and 10 bulls. 20 she-donkeys and 10 he-donkeys. And he put in his servant's charge each herd separately and said, when you meet Esau, tell him that, I represent his brother Jacob and I'm bringing this tribute. So from this list of gifts of animals, how do our sages derive that different types of husbands in different professions have different obligations of how often they have a conjugal obligation to their wives? How do you derive this? This is what Rashi says on that verse. 200 she-goats require 20 he-goats, right? So apparently you're going to have a herd that can reproduce itself if you send 200 female goats accompanied by 20 male goats, right? So with goats, 10 to 1 is going to work, right? Each male goat can satisfy the needs of 10 each male goat can satisfy the needs of 10 female goats. Similarly, with all of the species that composed Jacob's gift, right? Some was a ratio of 1 to 20, 1 to 10, 1 to 4, 1 to 2. And camels, 1 to 1. So the number of males was enough. He always sent the right number of males for the need of the females for that species of animal. In Bereshis Rabbah, okay, so this is a collection of midrash on the Torah. This is rabbinic literature. In Bereshis Rabbah, it extrapolates from this ratio of the animals sent by Jacob to his brother Esau. It extrapolates from here with respect to the rate of marital relations expected of a husband mentioned as a commandment in the Torah, right? A man is explicitly commanded in the Torah to provide for the needs of his wife, including her conjugal needs. That's explicit at Exodus 21:10. But how often is we're deriving from here. So those who stroll, these are the men of leisure, every day. The laborers, twice a week. The donkey drivers, once a week. The camel drivers, once every 30 days. The sailors, once every 6 months. Says Rashi, I do not know how to align this midrash precisely with our verse from which it is derived. How do you get these frequencies, every day, once a week, once a month, once every 6 months, from these, 20 goats to 10 female goats to a male goat, 1 camel to 1 camel, 4 donkeys to 1 donkey, etc. From these ratios, how do you get, these frequencies for the humans? Says Rashi, I do not know how to align this midrash precisely with our verse. But, says Rashi, it appears to my eyes that we have learned from here that the rate of marital relations is not uniform for every man, but it is based according to the exertion which is placed upon him. So just as different male animals have, different ability to satisfy females, likewise different men have different ability, not so much their own physical ability, but their situation in life makes it so that they have different abilities, to be there for their wives as they would like. And so, for we find here that he gave to each he-goat 10 she-goats, and similarly 10 female sheep to every male sheep. Since the males of the species are idle from work, it is their nature to mate more often and to impregnate 10 females. And once a female animal has become pregnant, she does not accept a male. But as for bulls, which engage in labor, he gave to each male only 4 females, because the bulls are more busy. And to the donkey, which goes on distant journeys, he only gave 2 females per male. And camels, which go on even more distant journeys, 1 female per 1 male. And so that's how Rashi draws that connection between this verse used in Bereshis Rabbah to derive these ratios that we're reading about here in Tractate Kesubos. Okay, so the Mishnah said the set interval for laborers to fulfill their conjugal obligations to their wives is twice a week. And the Gemara asks, isn't it Tana Baraisa for laborers once a week? And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, said, this is not difficult, la kasha. Here the cases where they work in their own city. There the cases where they work in another city. They work further away, they're going to have a less frequent obligation. And this is also taught in the Tosefta for laborers twice a week. Now, in what cases? This statement said it is when they work in their own city. But when they work in another city, their obligation is once a week. The Mishnah said the set interval for donkey drivers is once a week. And for other professions, it is even less frequent. And Rabba bar Rav Chanan said to Abaye, did the rabbi of our Mishnah, go to all that trouble listing all these different obligations, the once a week, the once a month, and the once every 6 months, just to say that if a man vows not to have sex with his wife for more than 1 week, according to Hillel, and that's the majority opinion, that they then have to get a divorce because he can't make that vow if it's going to deprive her of what she would otherwise be entitled to? So why would you then mention these ones that have longer obligations? If already somebody who's supposed to be there, twice a week, and he vows not to have, conjugal relations with her for more than a week, he has to divorce her. Why do we even need to learn about the ones who have even less frequent obligations? Right? So Rabba bar Rav Chanan asked that to Abaye, and Abaye answered, no. Now we're on 62b. The rabbi of our Mishnah taught us a law with regard to all of them, not only a man of leisure or a laborer, every day or twice a week. And he asked, but with regard to a sailor, it is said that the set interval for conjugal relations is 6 months. So why then should he have to divorce her if he vowed to forbid these relations for only a week? Right? If anyway she can only expect to be with him once every 6 months, why is he obligated to give her a divorce if he took a vow that he would not have relations with her for more than a week? Doesn't make any sense. Normally he's not home for 6 months anyway. And the answer is, it is well known that one who has bread in his basket is not comparable to one who does not have bread in his basket. On a fast day, one who does not have bread available in his basket suffers more than one who does have bread available and knows that he will be able to eat later. In this case as well, when a woman knows that marital relations are forbidden to her due to a vow, her suffering from waiting for her husband to return is increased. Rabba bar Rav Chanan said to Abaye, if a donkey driver who is already married wants to become a camel driver, what is the law, right? Donkey driver was once a week, camel driver once a month. So if he's already a donkey driver and he'd like to get into the camel driving line of work, maybe he'd make more money, but that would cause his wife that he would only be available to her once a month instead of once a week. Is it permitted? And Abaye answered him, a woman prefers a kav, i.e. modest means, with conjugal relations to 10 kav with abstinence. He says, generally speaking, a woman would be satisfied with less money to have more time with her husband. Consequently, if she is not amenable to him changing his career to make more money, if it means he's going to be on the road more, if she's not okay with it, then he's not allowed to do it, right? He has to get her agreement or he cannot do it. Now, the Mishnah stated, for sailors, the set interval for conjugal relations is once every 6 months, and this is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rav Barona said that Rav said. The law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rav Ada bar Ahava said that Rav said. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer, but the rabbis say students may leave their homes to study Torah for as long as 2 or 3 years without permission from their wives. And Rava said the sages relied on Rabbi Ada bar Ahava's opinion and performed an action like this themselves, but the results were sometimes fatal. And here we learn a difference between halacha and minhag, between the law and the custom. So yes, technically, legally, it's permitted for the sake of studying Torah to say, even without your wife's permission, hey, I'm going to go to the Torah Academy in another city. and I'm going to be there for 2 or 3 years, and then I'll come home, even against her wishes. But it is also a fact that the halacha is you may not cause distress to your wife. And if this is going to cause her tremendous distress, you really shouldn't do it. In fact, it would be illegal to do it. But even the risk of causing her distress is enough that you better not do this. Maybe it's legally permitted, but you better not do it. And now we're going to hear a few incidents as to why. And this is as it is related about Rav Rechumi, who would commonly study before Rava in Mechoza. This was a city in Babel. Now, he was accustomed to come back to his home every year on the eve of Yom Kippur. Right? So he was only seeing his wife once a year. I mean, we don't actually, I think that is what they're saying. Once a year, and he comes home to see his wife on Yom Kippur. Now, one day, he was particularly engrossed in the law that he was studying, and so he remained in the study hall, and he did not go home. His wife was expecting him that day and continually said to herself, now he is coming, now he is coming. But in the end, he did not come. She was distressed by this, and a tear fell from her eye. At that exact moment, Rav Rechumi was sitting on the roof, and the roof collapsed under him, and he died. And this teaches how much one must be careful, as he was punished severely for causing anguish to his wife, even inadvertently. So, when is the ideal time for Torah scholars to fulfill their conjugal obligations? And Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said the appropriate time for them is from Shabbat Eve to Shabbat Eve. In other words, on Friday nights. And similarly, it is stated with regard to the verse that brings forth its fruit in its season, Psalm 1:3. And Rav Yehuda said, and some say that it was Rav Huna, and some say that it was Rav Nachman, that this verse, Psalm 1:3, this is referring to one who engages in marital relations, bringing forth his fruit from Shabbat Eve to Shabbat Eve, meaning every Friday night he makes himself available to his wife. That is the time, that is the ideal time for a couple to have relations, Friday night. It is related further that Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chiya, and son-in-law of Rabbi Yanai, would go and sit in the study hall, and every Shabbos Eve, every Friday night, every Friday afternoon at twilight, he would come to his house. And when he would come, Rabbi Yanai would see a pillar of fire preceding him due to his sanctity. Right? So his father-in-law recognized that his son-in-law coming home to his wife was preceded by an aura of sanctity. Like this kid was so holy, so elevated that it was like visible on him. One day, Yehuda the son of Chiya, the son-in-law of Rabbi Yanai. So one day, Yehuda was engrossed in the law that he was studying. And he stayed in the study hall and he did not return home. When Rabbi Yanai did not see that sign preceding him, right, this forward wake, this leading wake, that normally he would see this, kind of holy light preceding Yehuda when he would come home. And when Rabbi Yanai didn't see that light coming into their house, he said to the family, turn his bed over, as one does at times of mourning, since he must have died, reasoning that if Yehuda were alive, he would not have missed his set interval for conjugal relations with his wife and would certainly have come home. And what he said became, quote, like an error that proceeds from a ruler, end quote, Ecclesiastes 10:5. And Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chiya, died, right? So was Rabbi Yanai correct that, well, if Yehuda's not coming home, it must be because he's dead? Or did him saying that, because he himself, Rabbi Yanai is a sage, and when the sages make utterances about other people, they really have to watch their tongue, because it could come out like a curse. And having said that, it's almost like it influenced that event to happen. And it's just a general lesson we see all the time. Words have power, right? That's why you want to speak in positive terms and not in negative terms, because when you put that out into the world, it can very much affect the world. It is related further that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the redactor of the Mishnah, arranged for his son to marry a daughter of the household of Rabbi Chia. And when he came to write the marriage contract, the girl died. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, "Is there, heaven forbid, some disqualification in these families?" As it appeared that God prevented this match from taking place. So they sat and looked into the family's ancestry, and they found that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was descended from Shaphatia ben Avital, the wife of David, whereas Rabbi Chia was descended from Shimi, David's brother. In other words, both families had royal ancestors, right? I mean, they were families of very good lineage. They found no disqualification, is what they're saying here. So that wasn't the problem. It seems like it was just bad luck that on the eve of this marriage, one of the spouses died. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi went and arranged for his son to marry a daughter of the household of Rabbi Yosei ben Zimra. And they agreed for him that he would support him for 12 years to go to study in the study hall. And it was assumed that he would first go to study and afterwards he would get married, spend 12 years learning, and then he would come back and marry the girl. They would be betrothed for all that time. Well, they passed the girl in front of the groom, and when he saw her, he said, "Ooh, let it just be 6 years until I can come and marry her." And they passed her in front of him again, and he said to them, "You know what? I'll marry her now, and then I will go study." You know, he's very attracted to her, she to him. So let's just get married now, and we can be man and wife together, and then I will go off and study. And presumably he would come back at regular intervals, not leave and come back 12 years later. But since the original plan was study for 12 years and then get married, he was embarrassed and he was ashamed to go see his father, as he thought that his father would reprimand him, because when he saw the girl, he desired her so much that he could not wait. And his father placated him and said to his son, "My son, you have your maker's perception," meaning you acted the same way that God does. You know, God is so attracted to his children, obviously not in a sexual way, but in the sense that God wants our presence, wants to be close to us, and would prefer not to wait. And how do we learn that? The proof for this is that initially it is written in Exodus 15:17, God says, "You bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place that you, O Lord," Moses is talking. "You bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place that you, O Lord, have made for you to dwell in." And this indicates that God's original intention was to build a temple for the Jewish people after they entered Eretz Yisrael. And then God's presence would have a home in this world where, the Shekhinah, where the presence, the divine presence would be manifest. And it would begin only once they entered the promised land and they built the temple. But what happened? Ultimately, it is written in Exodus 25:8, and God said, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." In other words, even while they were still in the wilderness, in the desert, which indicates that due to their closeness to God, they enjoyed greater affection, and he therefore advanced what would have originally come later. Right? God had planned that the Jewish people should have a temple, and at that time, God, would make his presence, in that home. But God loved being among the Jewish people, and so he said, "You know what? So you can build a Mishkan. You can build the tabernacle in the wilderness, and my presence will be there, and you'll have me sooner rather than later." And then, so the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is saying to his son, don't feel bad that you had such a longing to get married and be with your wife now rather than wait 12 years. So after his wedding, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's son, he went to the study hall for 12 years. Okay, so he didn't come back and visit regularly. He went to study and he was there for 12 years. By the time he came back, his wife had become infertile, as a consequence of spending many years without her husband, longing for him and deprived of her conjugal rights. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, "What should we do? If he will divorce her, people will say this poor woman waited and hoped for naught. And if he will marry another woman in order to beget children, people will say, well, this one who bears him children, that's his wife, and that one who lives with him is his mistress." Therefore, her husband, right, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, pleaded with God to have mercy on her. He must have gone to some really deep and profound place of prayer, and he begged God to have mercy on her, and she was cured. and her fertility returned. Rabbi Hananiah ben Hakinai went to the study hall at the end of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai's wedding feast. And Rabbi Shimon said to him, "Wait for me until I come with you after my days of celebration are over." However, since he wanted to learn Torah, he did not wait. And he went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. And by the time he came back, all the paths of his city had changed, and he did not even know how to go home. So he went and sat on the bank of the river and heard people calling to a certain girl, "Daughter of Hakinai, daughter of Hakinai, fill your pitcher and come up." So he said, I can conclude from this that this is my daughter. And so he followed her to his house. And his wife was sitting and sifting flour. She lifted her eyes up and saw him and recognized him, and her heart fluttered with agitation, and she died. She passed away from the emotional distress. And Rabbi Hananiah said before God, "Master of the universe, is this the reward of this poor woman?" And he pleaded for mercy for her, and she lived. Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. And when he came back to his house, he said, "I will not do what the son of Hakinai, who came home suddenly with tragic consequences for his wife, I will not do what he did." So he went and sat in the study hall in his hometown, and he sent a message to his house that he had arrived. And while he was sitting there, his own son, Rabbi Oshaya, whom he did not recognize because he'd been away for 12 years, came and sat before him. And Rabbi Oshaya asked him questions about law. And Rabbi Chama saw that the laws, the halachas, the learning of Rabbi Oshaya was incisive, i.e. that his son was very sharp. Rabbi Chama was distressed, and he said, if I had been here and I had taught my own son, I would have had a child like this. Of course, colorful, dramatic irony that he's saying this about his own son. He just doesn't know it's his son. But he thinks to himself, I should have stayed home all this time and educated my son so that I could have had a son as sharp as this one. So he was fortunate, I guess, in the merit of all the learning he did during the 12 years away, that his son found his own way to become sharp even without his own father educating him. So Rabbi Chama then went into his house and his son went in with him. Rabbi Chama then stood up before him to honor a Torah scholar, since he thought that he wanted to ask him a matter of law. And his wife said to him, "Is there a father who stands up before his son?" And the Gemara comments, Rami Bar Chama read the verse about him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Ecclesiastes 4:12. I'm sorry, I'm almost done. I'm very close to done. If you have any questions or comments, get them in. And this is referring to Rabbi Oshaya, the son of Rabbi Chama Bar Bisa, as he represented the third generation of Torah scholars in his family, right? So if you've got Torah scholars for 3 generations, that's a threefold cord, right? In other words, once that love of Torah is in a grandfather, a father, and a son, then it's going to stick around for a while in that family, right? This is a family that doesn't just learn because it's obligated to learn. This is a family that's committed to learning, recognizes the importance of learning and to piety, and it becomes a firm feature of that family. Okay, and that's where we'll end. Tomorrow we'll pick it up at the very bottom of 62b, and we'll have a very famous story on tomorrow's daf, the story of Rabbi Akiva, the great love story of Rabbi Akiva and his wife Rachel. All right, let us check questions or comments here on Kesubos Samech Beis, page 62. Sharon. Does that mean a married man cannot be a Nazir? Aren't they prohibited from marital relations? I'm going to have to check on that. Are they? My recollection is that a Nazir cannot cut his hair and cannot benefit from the grapevine, right? He cannot drink wine, not grape juice, not grapes. Nothing from the grapevine, and he does not become impure for a relative. He has to guard his purity. But I don't think he has to abstain from marital relations. I could be wrong, but that's my impression. So if indeed, I don't think he has to abstain from marital relations. So therefore, a Nazir could take such a vow. A married man could take a vow of Nazirus. But if you're right, that he's not permitted in conjugal relations, then that would certainly be a problem for a married man. Yosef, just a general question since I'm now in the habit of reading the entire page, and so are we. Is there a simple way to cross-reference the law from Steinsaltz and know where to find it in Mishnah Torah or Shulchan Aruch? Well, yeah, because in the Steinsaltz, if you have the Koren Talmud, which is the Steinsaltz, which has the notes about what the law is whenever a particular question comes up, and he gives what the halacha is, at the end of that citation, he says where he got it from, usually from Shulchan Aruch, sometimes Mishnah Brura, sometimes he'll also refer to Rambam's Mishnah Torah. So usually it's right there in the Koren Talmud. Michelle, what would be the purpose of getting married at all if the husband doesn't even intend on fulfilling his husbandly obligations? None. None. A husband cannot do that. If he goes into the marriage intending not to have marital relations with his wife, that's not a marriage. He, even if he comes to that conclusion after he's married, they have to end the marriage right there. If he went into the marriage with that intention, they have to end the marriage right there. Now you could ask, what if they agree? What if the husband and wife are just saying, we want companionship? We're not interested in having children. We're not interested in physical relations. And so we're going to get married on those terms. Then there's two answers for that, right? So if the man has not had children yet, right? Women are not obligated to have children. Women are not obligated to have children because it's, especially in the ancient world, dangerous for a woman to bear children, right? Childbirth was dangerous. So women are not obligated to have children. Men are obligated to have children. And until they have had a boy and a girl, according to Beis Hillel, which is the law, Shammai said 2 boys, but the law is a boy and a girl. Until they've had a boy and a girl, at least, they have not fulfilled that obligation. Now, not everybody is going to fulfill that obligation. It's not possible for everybody to fulfill that obligation, and they've done nothing wrong. But if, they're a healthy man who is capable of having children, has that obligation. So he shouldn't go into a marriage where he's planning not to have children if he can avoid it. But even one who is past the age of having children, or whose wife is past the age of having children, they should still marry, because the Bible also says it is not good for man to be alone. So that idea of companionship is a reason to have a marriage, even if marital relations are not part of it. But those are unusual circumstances, right? The normal thing for a husband and wife is they should intend to have marital relations with each other, whether it produces children or not, because that's the intimacy of marriage, as you are alluding to, Michelle. And finally, Bill, one of the best teachings from my specific tradition is a comment by Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury. It is not enough that we say God loves us. It is more accurate that God desires us. What a beautiful teaching with respect to this idea that, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi told his son, don't feel bad that you're, in a hurry to get married to your wife, that the two of you love each other and you don't want to wait 12 years of being betrothed to get married. You want to do it now. You're just like God, who desires to be close to his children. And that desire to be near to your loved ones is a very healthy thing, and in it we emulate God, right? So that's what we've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, for page 63, and the epic and famous story of Rabbi Akiva and his wife, Rachel.